The sea does not care about titles. It does not care about wedding vows, old bloodlines, or the fortunes promised in a marriage settlement. When a storm rises over the Cornish coast, it takes whatever has been left, unprotected. And when Damian Crowhurst found a woman clinging to wreckage beneath St. Orlande's chapel, he expected another victim of the tide. Instead, he found a bride. Not merely any bride, but Lady Evelina Harcourt, the intended wife of the man Damian had spent 4 years trying to destroy. He should have ordered the lifeboat back toward shore, but he reached for her, and that choice changed everything. The storm had arrived before dawn. By noon, the sky above Stormhaven had turned the color of iron. Wind bent the harbor signals, rain struck the cliffs, and waves burst against the seawall. Damian stood in the bow of the rescue boat, with one hand locked around a wet rope. He was the Duke of Stormhaven. He owned shipyards, warehouses, and enough coal to keep every hearth in his ancestral house burning through winter. Yet he was not inside Stormhaven Hall. A fishing vessel had failed to return before the tide changed, and Damian was not a man who waited beside a warm fire while others risked their lives on his coast. Practical dangers made sense to him. A broken mast could be replaced. A damaged roof could be repaired. Human betrayal was less orderly. He had learned that from his younger brother. "Boat to the east," Captain Silas Crane shouted. Through the rain, a narrow fishing vessel appeared beyond the harbor mouth. Its sail had torn, but all 6 men aboard were alive. "We have them," Crane said. "We can turn back." Damian was about to give the order when something pale rose between 2 waves near Devil's Reef. It vanished. "There," Damian said. The pale shape appeared again. At first, it looked like torn sailcloth. Then the wind caught it. Las. The rescue boat climbed the next wave, and Damian saw an overturned rowing boat drifting near the rocks. One side had split open. A woman clung to the shattered hull. Her ivory skirts floated around her like drowned petals. A bridal veil had twisted around one arm. Each time the sea pulled back, the soaked silk dragged her lower. "Take us closer," Damian ordered. "The current will drive us onto the reef," Crane warned. "Then row harder." The men pulled. Water crashed over the side, filling Damian's boots and striking the breath from his chest. When they rose again, the woman was gone. A hand broke the surface, then disappeared. Damian tied the rescue line around his waist. Crane seized his shoulder. "Your Grace, hold the rope." Damian went over the side. The cold felt like iron closing around his chest. Salt filled his mouth. The storm turned the world into darkness and pressure. Then he saw the veil beneath him. The woman's gown had wrapped around a jagged beam, holding her below the surface. Damian caught her around the waist and pulled. The silk would not move. He drew his knife and cut through the wedding skirt. Ivory fabric tore free and vanished into the sea. Damian kicked toward the surface. The rope tightened. A wave rolled both of them beneath the water again. His shoulder struck wood or stone. Pain flashed down his arm, but he did not release her. The crew hauled them toward the lifeboat. They dragged the woman aboard first. Damian climbed in behind her, coughing seawater across the boards. She lay motionless at his knees. Blood marked one temple. Her left hand was torn raw from gripping the wreckage. Her lips were blue. Captain Crane touched her throat. "She has a pulse." Damian stripped off his coat and wrapped it around her. He pushed wet hair away from her face. Then he recognized her. Lady Evelina Harcourt. He had seen her once across a London ballroom, standing beside Tristan Bellamy, with the controlled stillness of a woman performing a duty she had not chosen. Tristan Bellamy. 4 years earlier, Bellamy had persuaded Damian's younger brother to invest in the Meridian Shipping Company. The accounts promised profit. The inspection reports declared the ships safe. Nearly every document had been false. When one vessel broke apart in rough water, Damian's brother had returned below deck to free trapped sailors. His body had never been recovered. Bellamy blamed the captain and walked away untouched. Damian had spent 4 years buying his debts, closing his false partnerships, and stripping away every respectable name that protected him. This wedding was supposed to save Bellamy. The Harcourts possessed an old title, valuable coastal land, and Merrow Harbour. Yet Bellamy's bride was not standing beside him at an altar. She had been abandoned in the sea. Something glinted beneath the lace around Evelina's wrist. Damian freed a cord and found a brass seal attached to it. The crest belonged to Bellamy's private launch. The coward had been there. He had taken his boat from the island while his bride remained behind. Evelina coughed. Seawater spilled from her mouth. Her body convulsed once, then fell still. Damian bent over her. Her eyelids fluttered. For one moment, sharp grey eyes found his face. There was no recognition in them, only terror, exhaustion, and one final fragment of purpose. Her fingers closed around his shirt. "Do not let him," she whispered. The wind, nearly, stole the words. Damian lowered his head. "Do not let him do what?" Her lips barely moved. "Take the harbour." Then, Lady Evelina Harcourt went limp in the arms of the man who had sworn to destroy her bridegroom. Stormhaven Hall stood above the Cornish cliffs like a fortress built to withstand the sea. When Damian entered the great hall carrying an unconscious bride, every servant stopped moving. Water streamed from his coat. The torn remains of Evelina's wedding gown clung to her body, leaving a dark trail across the stone floor. Mrs. Agnes Whitcomb appeared at the top of the staircase. Evelina's blue lips were enough. "The sea chamber," she ordered. "Light both fires. Bring blankets and heated bricks. Send for Dr. Penrose." Damian carried Evelina upstairs. Her head rested against his shoulder. Each breath made a faint rattling sound inside her chest. He laid her on the bed. Mrs. Whitcomb stepped between them. "Out, Your Grace." She swallowed seawater. "And we cannot warm her while she remains inside wet silk." The door closed. Damian remained in the corridor while maids hurried past with basins and blankets. His hands were cut from the rescue rope, but he barely noticed. From behind the door came a violent cough. For 4 years, he had imagined taking everything from Tristan Bellamy. His ships, his credit, his place in society. He had never imagined carrying Bellamy's abandoned bride into his own house. Dr. Elias Penrose arrived after nightfall. When he emerged, exhaustion lined his face. "She will live," he said, "but she was in the water too long. Her lungs are inflamed, and fever is likely. And her injuries? Cuts on her hands. A bruised ankle. Nothing broken." Penrose glanced toward the closed door. She woke briefly and asked about a harbour. Whatever happened before the boat overturned frightened her more than the sea. After the doctor left, Damian entered. The chamber was unbearably warm. 2 fires burned behind brass screens. Evelina lay beneath several quilts, her hands and temple wrapped in white bandages. Damian pulled a chair beside the bed. He told himself he remained because she had spoken of Merrow Harbour. It was a reasonable explanation. It was also a lie. The fever came before dawn. For 2 days, Evelina drifted between sleep and delirium. She never called Tristan's name. Instead, she whispered about the Northern Key, her father's debts, and her sister Lydia's trust. She was not mourning a lost romance. She was mourning a broken bargain. On the 3rd morning, pale light entered through a gap in the curtains. Damian sat near the window with a shipping ledger open across one knee. The rustle of linen made him look toward the bed. Evelina's eyes were open, grey, sharp, confused. She studied the room and the sea beyond the window, then looked at him. "This is Stormhaven Hall." "It is." "You are Damian Crowhurst." The Duke of Stormhaven. I know who you are." Her voice was rough. Damian poured water into a glass. She tried to sit up, but her arms trembled. He moved forward, then stopped before touching her. "May I?" Surprise crossed her face. She nodded. Damian helped her lean against the pillows. She drank slowly. "How long?" she asked. 3 days. The glass became still in her hands. A bride missing for 3 days was ruined. A bride found inside an unmarried duke's house would become a scandal. "Did anyone come for me?" "No." Her shoulders became perfectly still. "He left me." "Tell me what happened." Evelina looked at her bandaged hands. "Tristan received a letter before the ceremony. He said there was trouble at the harbor and promised to return with the launch. He took your waterproof cloak." Her eyes lifted. "How do you know?" "I found the seal from his private boat tangled around your wrist. He said his coat was damaged. The guests had already crossed. When the launch did not return, the tide covered the causeway." "How did you leave?" "There was a caretaker's boat behind the chapel." "You rode into that storm alone?" "The water was entering the chapel. Staying seemed a slower way to die." "What was in the letter?" she asked. "The last of Bellamy's credit collapsed that morning. His banks demanded payment. His insurers withdrew. Evelina understood immediately. You did that. I exposed what was already rotten. You destroyed him." "Yes." A humorless breath escaped her. "And in doing so, you destroyed me. I pulled you from the sea. You also made certain the man buying my family's survival could no longer pay for it. Bellamy abandoned you because you ceased to be useful. That choice belongs to him." Evelina turned toward the fire. "My father's creditors will take everything. Merrow Harbor remains protected." "For how long?" Damian did not answer. Her gaze returned to him. "Why did you bring me here?" "The roads were closed." "That is not the only reason. You hate Tristan Bellamy. Now his abandoned bride is in your house. Am I a trophy?" Damian leaned forward. "I do not collect trophy." "Then what do you collect?" "Debts, evidence, occasionally solutions." He placed a folded newspaper on the blanket. The headline announced that Lady Evelina Harcourt had fled her wedding after conspiring with the Duke of Stormhaven. She read it twice. "He left me to drown," she whispered, "and told them I betrayed him. He needs a story in which he remains the injured man." Her fingers tightened until the paper tore. Damian opened the ledger. A copied agreement carried Tristan's signature. It promised control of Merrow Harbor to one of his remaining creditors immediately after the marriage. Evelina stared at the page. Tristan had intended to sell the harbor before their vows were spoken. "You told me not to let him take the harbor," Damian said. Evelina raised her eyes. "I remember. Then you should know that Bellamy has already begun trying." By the 6th day, the storm had moved east, leaving the Cornish coast washed clean and painfully bright. Sunlight poured through the windows of the morning room. Beyond the glass, the sea looked calm enough to be innocent. Evelina sat beside the fire, wrapped in a heavy wool shawl. Her ankle remained swollen. Thin bandages covered both palms. On the table before her lay the newspaper announcing her disappearance and the agreement promising Merrow Harbor to Tristan's creditors. She had read both until the words became meaningless. Her reputation was ruined. Her father's estate was exposed. The man she had agreed to marry had abandoned her in a flooding chapel, then told London she had fled with his enemy. Evelina felt no grief for the marriage. There had been no love to mourn. Tristan had promised to pay her father's debts, secure Lydia's future, and preserve Merrow Harbor. In exchange, Evelina would give him her name, her connections, and the obedience expected from a wife. It had been a transaction. He had broken it before the vows were spoken. The morning room doors opened. Damian entered, carrying a stack of papers beneath one arm. 2 people followed him. The first was Mr. Arthur Wren, Damian's solicitor. The second was a severe-looking woman in a dark grey dress, perhaps 50 years old, with silver beginning to show in her hair. Damian stopped opposite Evelina. "Lady Evelina," This is Mrs. Margaret Hale. The woman inclined her head. I advise women regarding property settlements, trusts, and inheritance disputes. Evelina looked at Damian. Your advisor? Yours. Mrs. Hale took the chair beside Evelina. His Grace paid my travel expenses, she said. He has also signed a declaration stating that my duty is entirely to you. Nothing you tell me will be shared with him without your permission. Evelina studied Damian more carefully. You brought me independent counsel. I assumed you would prefer advice from someone whose future does not depend upon agreeing with me. Mr. Wren placed 3 folders on the table. The roads to Merrow are open, Damian said. You may return to your family this afternoon. Evelina looked down at the folders. To what? Your father has not yet lost the estate. Not yet. Damian did not contradict her. The first arrangement provides guards, transportation, and legal representation against Bellamy's accusations. The second is a secured loan sufficient to prevent immediate foreclosure. Evelina touched the edge of the second folder. What does the loan cost? Interest, Damian said. Nothing more. You would lend money to the father of your enemy's abandoned bride without asking for the harbor? I would lend money to prevent several hundred families from losing their work because your father trusted a criminal. His tone remained calm. There was no kindness in the words, only practicality. It was somehow easier to believe. And the third folder? Evelina asked. The room became silent. Damian sat opposite her. A marriage settlement. Evelina stared at him. For one moment, she believed the fever had returned. Marry you? Yes. A dry laugh escaped her. You are either mad or considerably more cruel than your servants believe. I am entirely rational. You barely know me. I know you survived a storm that would have killed most people. I know you woke after 3 days and asked about your family's harbor before asking about yourself. His dark eyes held hers. I know Bellamy left you because your value to him appeared to have disappeared. And now you intend to discover whether he was mistaken. Yes, the honesty struck harder than a lie would have. Damian did not offer romance. He did not claim fate had carried her into his arms. He placed the proposal before her, like another financial document. What do you gain? She asked. Bellamy's final humiliation. Evelina's mouth tightened. You want to marry me to punish him. I want to ensure he never convinces another investor that he can recover. He abandoned the woman who would have saved him. If that woman becomes the Duchess of Stormhaven, every respectable door he approaches will close. And Merrow Harbor? I want access to its western route. So you do want it. I will not insult you by pretending otherwise. Damian leaned back. Bellamy intended to sell the northern key and place the remaining harbor under creditors who answer to him. I would preserve it and connect it to Stormhaven shipping. Under your control. Under whatever terms you negotiate. Evelina looked toward Mrs. Hale. The woman's face revealed nothing. What would be expected of me? Evelina asked. A public alliance. The responsibilities of a duchess. Honesty in matters that concern both estates. And privately? Nothing. You do not freely choose. The answer came without hesitation. No demand for an heir. No assumption that rescue had purchased her body. Evelina looked at the marriage settlement. You expect me to decide while injured, disgraced, and dependent upon your hospitality? No. Damian rose. Read every page. Change anything you dislike. Mrs. Hale will remain as long as necessary. He moved toward the door. Your Grace. Damian stopped. If I refuse to marry you, will you still prevent Tristan from taking Merrow Harbor? Yes. Even though you gain nothing, I gain the knowledge that Bellamy does not control another stretch of coast. His expression darkened. He has already sent enough men to unsafe deaths. Then he left. Evelina spent the next 2 days reading. The original settlement protected her personal allowance and granted her separate chambers. It was generous. It was not enough. She rewrote it. Merrow Harbor would remain legally separate from the Stormhaven estate. Her father's debts would be restructured under trustees, preventing him from borrowing against the harbour again. Lydia's dowry would be placed beyond the Earl's control. Evelina would manage a coastal relief fund in her own name. No investment involving Merrow could proceed without her signature. No physical relationship would be required without mutual consent. Mrs. Hale read the amendments. You have removed most of the Duke's control. He invited me to become a partner. A faint smile touched the woman's mouth. Then we shall learn whether he understands the meaning of the word. Damian returned that evening. Evelina read every condition aloud. He listened without interruption. When she finished, he picked up the pen and signed. You have no objections? She asked. You requested authority over property that belongs to your family and protection from promises you did not make. Mrs. Hale turned the final page. There is an additional clause. Evelina recognized Damian's handwriting. If he died, she would retain control of Merrow's protections and the coastal fund for the remainder of her life. No future Duke of Stormhaven could remove her. I did not ask for this. No. Why did you add it? Damian placed the pen beside her hand. A right that disappears when a husband dies is not a right. It is permission. Evelina looked at him. Tristan had promised safety, while preparing to steal everything she possessed. Damian promised nothing except the truth. But he had written his own limits into the agreement. She picked up the pen. The healing cuts in her palm ached as she signed her name. When she finished, Damian remained perfectly still. Evelina placed the pen on the table. Very well, Your Grace. Her grey eyes held his. Let us make the man who left me to drown watch me return above him. The wedding took place 8 days later. There were no white roses, crowded pews, or musicians waiting beneath the chapel windows. Only a bishop, 2 witnesses, Mrs. Whitcomb, and the sound of the sea striking the cliffs below Stormhaven Hall. Evelina wore dark blue silk. The colour had been Damian's suggestion. You have already worn white for a man who did not deserve it, he had said. She had not argued. Damian stood beside her in black. His expression revealed nothing as the bishop spoke of duty, fidelity, and the joining of 2 lives. Their hands touched only when the ceremony required it. His fingers were warm around hers. Do you, Damian Crowhurst, take this woman? I do. His voice was steady. No hesitation. No tenderness. Yet Evelina remembered the way he had asked permission before helping her sit up. She remembered the clause he had added to protect her rights after his death. Tristan had spoken beautifully and acted without honor. Damian spoke like a man negotiating a shipping contract, but every promise he made was placed in writing. When the bishop pronounced them husband and wife, Damian did not kiss her. He looked at her instead. Are you well? It was not the question a triumphant bridegroom was expected to ask. It was exactly the question Evelina needed. Yes, they signed the register. Lady Evelina Harcourt disappeared beneath one line of ink. In her place stood Evelina Crowhurst, Duchess of Stormhaven. 3 days later, they departed for London. By the time the Stormhaven carriage entered Grosvenor Square, the story had already reached every drawing room in the city. The bride abandoned at St. Orleans had not drowned. She had married Tristan Bellamy's most powerful enemy. Some called it a rescue. Others called it revenge. Nearly everyone believed Evelina had exchanged one calculating man for another. The Stormhaven townhouse was immense, silent, and maintained with military precision. Damian gave her a private suite overlooking the garden, a separate study, and a key to every room she was entitled to enter. Her father sent no letter of apology, only a message asking when Damian would begin paying the Merrow debts. Evelina answered, through Mrs. Hale. The debts would be reviewed by trustees. No payment would be sent directly to the Earl. Lydia's letter arrived the following morning. It contained only 4 lines. Father is furious. The creditors have stopped calling. I knew You would survive. Please do not let them make you disappear again." Evelina folded the letter and placed it beside her heart. Her first public appearance as Duchess would take place that evening at the Hartington Maritime Ball. An hour before their departure, Damian entered her dressing room, carrying a narrow black box. Evelina sat before the mirror, while her maid arranged the final pins in her hair. "What is that?" she asked. Damian placed the box on the table. Inside lay a necklace of black pearls, separated by small diamonds. The pearls were dark as deep water, their surfaces catching hints of blue and silver beneath the candlelight. "The Stormhaven pearls," Damian said. "They belong to my grandmother. They have not been seen in public for years." 21. Evelina touched one carefully. "Why give them to me? Because London expects to see a ruined woman wearing borrowed respectability." His reflection met hers. "I intend for them to see the Duchess of Stormhaven." Evelina looked down at the necklace. "Amour, if that is how you choose to wear it." Damian lifted the pearls, then stopped behind her. "May I?" The question should not have affected her. It was only a necklace. Yet Tristan had never asked permission before placing his hand at her waist, moving her chair, or deciding where she would stand. Evelina gathered her hair and nodded. Damian fastened the clasp. His knuckles brushed the back of her neck. The contact lasted less than a second. Still, something changed in the quiet room. Damian stepped away first. "The carriage is ready." The Hartington residence blazed with light. Hundreds of candles reflected from mirrors and chandeliers. Music floated above silk gowns, polished medals, and conversations sharpened by curiosity. The major domo struck his staff against the floor. The Duke and Duchess of Stormhaven. Silence spread from the staircase into the ballroom. Evelina placed her hand on Damian's arm. They descended together. She felt every stare. Some women looked disappointed that the sea had not left visible damage. Some men examined her, as though attempting to calculate the value of Merrow Harbour from the cut of her gown. Damian's pace never changed. At the bottom of the staircase, Lady Cordelia Fenwick approached in rose silk. Her concern was arranged as carefully as her hair. "My dear Duchess, we were all terribly worried. What an ordeal you endured. How kind of you." Lady Cordelia lowered her voice just enough to suggest intimacy while ensuring those nearest could hear. The sea can be cruel to a woman who finds herself abandoned. For one instant, the ballroom vanished. Evelina heard water striking the chapel doors. She felt wet silk dragging around her legs and the broken boat slipping beneath her fingers. Damian's hand closed gently over hers. He did not step forward. He did not answer for her. He waited. Evelina looked directly at Lady Cordelia. The sea was cruel. A victorious smile began forming on the woman's face. But at least it made no attempt to disguise its nature. Lady Cordelia blinked. "I beg your pardon. The sea tried openly to drown me. I find that honesty preferable to concern, offered only in the hope of discovering how badly I was damaged." Someone nearby covered a laugh. Lady Cordelia's face changed color. "How severe marriage has made you." "No, survival did that." Evelina moved past her. The orchestra began a waltz. Damian offered his hand. "Will you dance with me? You are asking many questions tonight. I am attempting to improve." She placed her hand in his. Damian guided her onto the floor. They moved easily together, though they had never practiced. His hand remained firm at her waist without pulling her closer than necessary. "They are still watching," Evelina said. "Let them. They believe you married me to humiliate Tristan." "I did." She looked up at him. The honesty no longer surprised her. "Do you regret it?" "No." His gaze dropped briefly to the black pearls at her throat. "But revenge is not the only reason I am holding you now." Before Evelina could ask what he meant, the music ended. Damian released her. The distance between them felt colder than it had before the dance. Later that night, Evelina returned to her room and removed the pearls. When she lifted the velvet lining to place them inside the box, she found a folded note beneath it. The paper carried no seal. The message contained only one sentence. Ask your husband what truly happened aboard the ship that killed his brother. Evelina did not confront Damian that night. She remained awake until dawn, with the unsigned note lying beside the black pearls. Ask your husband what truly happened aboard the ship that killed his brother. The words suggested that Damian had concealed something. Perhaps the North Star had not been a simple tragedy caused by Tristan's greed. Perhaps Damian's hatred had begun with a truth darker than the one he had shared. By breakfast, Evelina had made her decision. She found Damian inside his study, standing before a wall covered with shipping maps. The morning newspapers lay unopened on his desk. Evelina placed the note between them. Damian read it once. His expression did not change. Where did you find this? Inside the pearl box. No servant should have touched it after it left the vault. That is not an answer. Damian looked toward the closed door. What do you want to know? The truth. He crossed the room and locked the door. The North Star belonged to Meridian Shipping, he said. Tristan controlled the company through two partners whose names appeared on the official records. The inspection report declared the ship safe. The report presented to the insurers did. Damian opened a cabinet and removed a leather file. Inside were copies of damaged letters, witness statements, and ship accounts. The original surveyor found rot below the waterline. He warned that the hull would not survive heavy seas. Tristan altered his report and ordered the ship loaded beyond its safe limit. Evelina turned one page. The cargo was insured for more than its value. Yes, so he expected the ship to fail. He expected a profitable accident. The words settled heavily between them. Damian's younger brother, Edward, had invested much of his inheritance in Meridian Shipping. He was 26, idealistic, and determined to prove he could build something without depending upon the Stormhaven title. When rumors about unsafe vessels reached him, Edward confronted Tristan. Tristan showed him the forged inspection. Edward believed it. He boarded the North Star to inspect the cargo before she sailed, Damian said. The weather was calm when they left Falmouth, but the ship broke apart. 6 miles from the coast, Damian's voice became quieter. The lower hold flooded first. The captain ordered everyone into the boats. Edward had already reached the deck when he learned that 3 cabin boys were trapped below. Evelina understood before he continued. He went back for them. Yes. Were the boys saved? One survived. And Edward? His body was never found. Damian closed the file. For 4 years, he had traced Tristan's false companies, purchased his debts, and forced his creditors to examine records they had preferred to ignore. You wanted him to lose everything, Evelina said. I wanted him to understand what it meant to watch a life disappear, because another man valued money more than safety. Did destroying his companies bring Edward back? Damian's gaze hardened. No. Did it help the families of the men who died? They received compensation. How much? The question stopped him. Evelina opened the compensation ledger on his desk. The numbers beside the names were small. Some payments had been reduced by legal fees. Several families had received nothing after Meridian declared bankruptcy. You punished Tristan, she said. But the people he harmed remained poor. Damian moved toward the window. You believe my revenge was useless. I believe it was incomplete. He turned. What would you have done? Repaired. What could still be repaired? The study became silent, except for the clock above the fireplace. Then, Damian returned to the desk. What first? It was not an apology, but it was the first time he had asked her how his power should be used. They spent the day reviewing the North Star accounts. 12 families had never received their full settlements. One sailor who lost the use of his left hand had been denied compensation after refusing to blame the captain. 2 widows had surrendered most of their payments to lawyers employed by Meridian's insurers. Damian ordered the missing money restored. Evelina insisted that future payments be controlled by independent trustees rather than Stormhaven agents. You distrust me, he said. I distrust any system that remains fair only while one powerful man chooses to be fair. To her surprise, Damian smiled. You have been my wife for less than a week, and have already removed me from my own fund. You gave me authority. I am beginning to understand the danger of that decision. Over the following weeks, the study became the center of their marriage. They reviewed harbor inspections in the morning and compensation claims after dinner. Evelina proposed emergency stores for isolated coastal villages. Damian offered ships, warehouses, and men. He preferred immediate decisions. She demanded written safeguards. He hated committees. She reminded him that permanent institutions could not depend upon his mood. They argued often. Neither apologized merely to restore peace. Gradually, the distance between them changed. Damian remembered that Evelina drank coffee without sugar. She learned that he stopped eating whenever he became absorbed in accounts and began leaving bread beside his hand. One evening, Evelina discovered that a clerk had entered the same widow twice under different spellings. You have paid Mrs. Talbot 2 pensions, she said. Damian examined the page. Then Mrs. Talbot has demonstrated excellent financial instincts. Evelina laughed. The sound surprised both of them. Damian looked at her for so long that the amusement faded from her face. What? I had not heard you laugh before. A strand of hair had fallen across her cheek. Damian lifted his hand, then stopped. May I? Evelina nodded. His fingers brushed the loose strand behind her ear. The touch was brief. Neither moved away. A knock broke the silence. Mr. Wren entered with a broad-shouldered man, wearing an old naval coat. This is Captain Josiah Mercer, the solicitor said. He served aboard the North Star. Mercer removed a folded document from inside his coat. The original inspection report declared the vessel unfit to sail. Beneath the surveyor's signature appeared a handwritten order. Proceed as scheduled. Any delay will result in dismissal without wages. The initials belonged to Tristan Bellamy. I kept it because I knew the official copy had been altered, Mercer said. Will you testify? Evelina asked. Yes. He glanced toward the dark windows. But Bellamy has men watching every dock in London. Damian placed Mercer under guard in a room above Mr. Wren's offices. By sunrise, both guards had been found unconscious. Captain Mercer had disappeared. His inspection report was gone. On the empty bed rested a dark green cord bearing Tristan Bellamy's brass seal. Captain Josiah Mercer remained missing for 11 days. Damian sent men to every harbour, coaching inn and lodging house between London and Falmouth. Mr. Wren questioned the guards until both could remember every sound from the night they were attacked. They had heard no struggle, only the soft opening of a door. No demand for money arrived. No body was recovered from the river. The original inspection report had vanished with the captain. Only the dark green cord remained. It was not evidence. It was a warning. Tristan wanted Damian to understand that anyone who threatened him could be reached. Evelina expected her husband to answer with anger. Instead, Damian became quiet. He doubled the guards outside the townhouse. Every visitor was searched. Servants carried messages only in pairs. At night, Evelina heard his footsteps moving between the study and the front hall long after the rest of the house had gone dark. He no longer left her unprotected. He also no longer asked whether she wished to be protected. On the 11th day, they attended the Royal Maritime Exhibition. Damian had wanted to cancel their appearance. Evelina refused. If we disappear from society immediately after Captain Mercer vanishes, Tristan will believe we are frightened. We should be frightened. I am. She fastened the black pearls around her throat. But I will not make fear look like surrender. The exhibition occupied a vast conservatory near Hyde Park. Model ships stood inside polished glass cases. Maps of distant coastlines covered the walls. Shipping companies displayed engines, navigation instruments, and painted promises of safe voyages. Beneath the glass roof, the air smelled of wet earth and imported flowers. Damian was drawn away by several shipbuilders, disputing a new hull design. Evelina entered a quieter gallery containing maritime charts. She was studying a painted map of the Cornish coast when a familiar voice spoke behind her. "You always did prefer practical things to beautiful ones." Her fingers tightened around her closed fan. She turned. Tristan Bellamy stood beneath the shadow of a tall palm. He wore a dark blue coat cut in the latest fashion. His gloves were pale grey. His hair was perfectly arranged. He did not resemble a bankrupt man fleeing creditors. He looked prosperous, untouched, as though the storm at St. Orlan's had happened only to her. "Lord Bellamy," Evelina said. His smile widened. "Your Grace." The title sounded bitter in his mouth. "I confess, I did not expect you to recover so impressively. You should leave." "Before we discuss Captain Mercer?" Evelina gave him no reaction. Tristan stepped closer. "I heard the account. 2 guards unconscious. A valuable witness carried away, without anyone seeing a thing. What have you done with him?" "Why assume I have done anything?" "Because cowardice is the only skill you practice consistently." His smile weakened. The insult had reached him. "You have changed." "No, I have merely stopped protecting you from my honest opinion." Tristan glanced across the hall toward Damian. "Stormhaven has trained you well. He gave me room to speak. Do not mistake that for training. You believe you know him. I know enough. Do you know how many companies he destroyed to reach me? How many men lost their investments because Damian Crowhurst considered them acceptable damage? He showed me the accounts." "Did he show you all of them?" The question landed too carefully to be accidental. Tristan lowered his voice. "Your husband spent 4 years watching me. Every debt, every ship, every person who entered my house." His gaze settled on the pearls around Evelina's throat. "Do you honestly believe he happened to find you near St. Orlan's Island? He was inspecting the coastal rescue stations." "So he says. Captain Crane and 6 fishermen say the same. Men paid by Stormhaven." Evelina held his chaser. "You left me in a flooding chapel, and he married you because you survived it." Tristan's expression became almost gentle. "He wanted my destruction. You were the final weapon placed directly into his hands. I knew revenge was part of his proposal. But did he tell you what happens when revenge ends?" For the first time, Evelina did not answer. Tristan saw it. His confidence returned. "When I am imprisoned, ruined, or dead, Damian will no longer require the abandoned bride of Tristan Bellamy. No enemy, no performance, no reason to pretend your marriage has become anything more than a successful strategy." The fear had lived inside Evelina from the day she signed the settlement. Their marriage had begun as a weapon. What remained when the war was over? "You were useful to me," Tristan whispered. "Now you are useful to him." Evelina lifted her chin. "You continue to make one mistake." "And what is that?" "You believe every man sees women as you do." A deep voice entered the silence. "That has always been one of Bellamy's more expensive errors." Damian stood at the entrance to the gallery. He approached without hurry and stopped beside Evelina. He did not touch her. He did not place himself between them. He simply waited, giving her the choice to remain or leave. Tristan's smile tightened. "You should ask your wife what she will become when I am no longer available to hold your marriage together." Damian's expression remained calm. "I know what my wife is. Do you? She is the woman whose harbor you attempted to steal, whose death you prepared to explain, and whose survival will place every document bearing your signature before a magistrate." "You have no proof." "Then why are you trembling?" Tristan looked down. His right hand was shaking. He closed it into a fist. "This is not finished." "No," Damian said. "It is merely taking longer than I intended." Tristan turned to Evelina. "When he finishes using you, remember that I warned you. You warned me that the launch would return." Her voice remained perfectly level. "You neglected to mention that you had ordered the remaining boat removed." The color disappeared from Tristan's face. It returned too late. He gave a mocking bow and walked quickly from the gallery. Damian watched him disappear into the crowd. Then he turned to Evelina. "What did you mean?" He reacted. "That does not prove he ordered it." "No, but it proves he understands the accusation." They returned to the townhouse before the exhibition ended. Damian led Evelina to the private records room behind his study. The chamber smelled of paper, sealing wax, and dust. Boxes covered every shelf, each labeled with the name of a ship, creditor, or company connected to Tristan. Damian placed a heavy ring of keys in her hand. "These open every cabinet." "All of them?" "All that I possess. You understand I may find something that changes how I see you." "Yes. You may regret giving me access." "Probably." His eyes held hers. "But you asked for truth. I cannot ask you to trust me while keeping the door locked." For 2 hours, they searched in silence. Near midnight, Evelina found a narrow ledger hidden beneath a stack of harbor invoices. One payment had been made to Peter Coyle. Occupation: boatman. Location: St. Orleans Island. The date was the morning of her wedding. Beside the amount appeared a handwritten instruction: remove the remaining launch before the second tide. If Lady Evelina survives, prepare the French correspondence. Her fingers began to shake. Tristan had not panicked and forgotten her. He had planned her abandonment. Damian read the entry over her shoulder. "What is the French correspondence?" Evelina asked. His face became cold. "I believe Bellamy intended to claim you escaped the island to meet another man." A violent knock struck the locked door. Mr. Wren entered without waiting for permission. Rain darkened his coat, and his face was pale. "We have found Captain Mercer." Damian stepped forward. "Alive?" "Yes." Mr. Wren hesitated. "But unless we reach him before dawn, he will be placed aboard a ship, leaving English waters under a false name." The carriage reached Greenwich before dawn. Rain swept across the river, turning the lamps into blurred circles of yellow light. Damian stepped down before the wheels had fully stopped. Mr. Wren followed with 2 constables and a harbour officer carrying a magistrate's order. Evelina climbed out behind them. "You should remain in the carriage," Damian said. "No, this is a prison vessel. Bellamy may have men aboard. Captain Mercer disappeared because he intended to help us. You have already nearly died once because of Tristan, and I will not spend the rest of this marriage being hidden whenever he becomes dangerous. I am not cargo to be stored somewhere safe, Damian." Something changed in his face. "Stay beside me." The prison hulk lay anchored away from the quay, its black hull rising from the water like a rotting fortress. They crossed in a narrow harbour boat. River, mud, wet timber, sickness trapped beneath sealed hatches. The keeper protested when the constables presented the order. "There is no Josiah Mercer aboard." "Then you will have no objection to our searching," Mr. Wren said. Recognition ended the argument. The register listed a prisoner named Joseph Marsh, age 51, occupation, dock, laborer, charge, theft, scheduled transfer before sunrise. The same hand completed the description, accusation, and approval. 3 officers should have signed, Mr. Wren said. This record was prepared in advance. Damian turned toward the keeper. "Open the cell." Captain Mercer lay on a filthy pallet inside. His face was bruised. One eye had swollen shut. His wrists were marked by rope. Evelina believed they had arrived too late. Then his chest moved. Damian crouched beside him. "Bellamy's men," Mercer nodded. "They took me outside Wren's office. Paid a clerk to place me here under another name. Where is the original report?" "Inside the lining of my sea chest at Falmouth Harbour office." Evelina knelt beside him. "What did they want?" "They wanted me to say Stormhaven paid me to change my account." Mercer coughed. "Bellamy also had the French letters prepared before the wedding." "What letters?" "Letters claiming you had a lover in Brittany. If you survived St. Orleans, He meant to say you fled willingly. The line in the ledger returned to her. If Lady Evelina survives, prepare the French correspondence. Tristan had planned both endings. If she drowned, he would become the grieving bridegroom. If she lived, he would call her an adulteress. Mercer's fingers closed around Damian's sleeve. He paid the assistant keeper at Devil's Reef. For what? To alter the signal lamp on the night the North Star sank. The ship had not merely sailed with a damaged hull. Someone had guided it toward dangerous water. The constables carried Mercer upstairs. A physician ordered him taken to a guarded infirmary. During the journey back, Damian sat opposite Evelina in silence. I believed Edward died because Bellamy valued money more than human life, he said. Now I know the disaster was planned. What will you do? Find Bellamy. And then? He did not answer. If you kill him, the truth will disappear beneath the scandal. He murdered my brother, and he tried to murder me. His gaze snapped toward hers. That does not give either of us the right to destroy the evidence for the sake of anger. I think hatred is the only language you trust when you are afraid, Evelina said. Damian became completely still. You brought me into this war. Do not silence me now, because it has become more personal. He looked down at his hands. When I pulled you from the sea, I believed Bellamy had placed a weapon in my arms. I knew what your survival could do to him. I told myself that was why I stayed beside your bed. And now? Now the thought of losing you is the only thing that makes me understand what Edward must have felt when the ship broke beneath him. I do not know how to protect you without trying to control everything around you, Damian said. Then learn. His eyes lifted. Help me. It was the first time Damian Crowhurst had asked rather than commanded. Evelina crossed the narrow space and placed one hand against his cheek. You may begin by understanding that I am not asking to be protected from my own choices. Damian covered her hand with his. May I kiss you? The question carried more vulnerability than any declaration. Evelina answered by leaning toward him. The first touch of his mouth was careful. Then weeks of fear and restraint broke between them. When they separated, his forehead rested against hers. The agreement said nothing about this. Evelina whispered, We may require an amendment. It will require both signatures. When they reached the townhouse, a sealed packet waited on Evelina's desk. Inside were 6 letters written in her name. They described an affair with a fictional French shipping agent. A separate note demanded £30,000, control of Merrow's northern quay, and her silence. Damian read it. I will find him before sunset. No. Evelina spread the letters across the desk. The paper is English. One letter mentions a hotel that did not exist on the date written here. These were produced by a professional copyist. You intend to answer him. I intend to make him believe I am frightened. Before Damian could object, Mr. Wren entered carrying a message marked with Captain Crane's seal. Damian broke it open. His expression changed. What is it? Evelina asked. He handed her the paper. The assistant keeper at Devil's Reef has vanished. The main signal lamp has been destroyed. A storm is moving towards Saint-Orleans before nightfall. They left London before sunrise. Captain Mercer remained inside a guarded infirmary. His injuries made travel impossible, but before Damian departed, the captain gave them one final warning. My sea chest is no longer at the harbour office, he said. A clerk placed it aboard the Greyhaven yesterday morning. He believed Stormhaven agents would collect it when the ship reached Cornwall. What is inside? Evelina asked. The original inspection report. Copies of the payments made to the assistant keeper at Devil's Reef. Mercer looked toward Damian. Enough to prove Bellamy did not merely send the North Star to sea. He arranged where she would sink. The Greyhaven was expected to pass Devil's Reef before nightfall. The signal lamp had been destroyed. A storm was moving toward the coast. Tristan intended to bury the final evidence beneath the sea. The journey west became a race against weather. Rain followed the train across the countryside. Wind struck the carriage when they left the final station. By the time Stormhaven Hall appeared above the cliffs, clouds had covered the horizon. Captain Silas Crane waited in the courtyard. "The assistant keeper has vanished," he said. "The main lens is cracked, and the reserve oil has been contaminated with seawater." "Can the lamp be repaired?" Damian asked. "Not before dark." "Has the Greyhaven been warned?" "We sent a harbour cutter. She was not on her expected route." Evelina looked toward the blackening sea. "Tristan changed it." Crane nodded. "The Greyhaven was sighted south of St. Orleans. She is approaching through the Western Channel. The false signal marked that channel as safe. In reality, it led directly toward Devil's Reef. Damian ordered horses prepared. "I am coming," Evelina said. "No." The answer came without hesitation. "The lighthouse stands above exposed rock." Damian continued. "The road will be underwater before the tide turns. The last storm nearly killed me. That is why I know what happens when someone waits for a rescue that never comes. I will not place you in danger again." "You are not placing me anywhere." Evelina held his gaze. "You asked me to help you learn. Begin now." For one moment, Damian looked ready to command the servants to lock every door in the house. Then, his expression changed. He held out his hand. "Stay where Crane can see you." Evelina placed a hand in his. "I will stay where I am useful." They rowed toward Devil's Reef with Captain Crane and 8 harbour men. The path narrowed as it climbed along the cliffs. Rain struck Evelina's face. The sea below had turned almost black, its surface broken by lines of white foam. They reached the lighthouse as the final daylight faded. Broken glass covered the floor. The brass mechanism had been smashed with a hammer. Water filled the main oil reservoir. Crane examined the damage. "We cannot restore the lamp." Evelina looked around the tower. Coils of rope hung from the walls. Old signal flags lay inside a cabinet. 2 sealed barrels of lamp oil stood near the entrance. "The oil is still usable?" Crane opened one barrel. "Yes." "Then we do not need the lamp." Damian followed her gaze toward the high ground above the reef. "What are you proposing?" 3 fires. The traditional safe passage signal used 3 lights in a straight line. Evelina ordered the men to place oil-soaked sailcloth beneath iron covers and arrange the fires in a curve leading away from the Western Channel. "The rain may extinguish them," Crane warned. "Then feed them more oil." The first fire struggled against the wind. The second caught. The third rose in a violent column of orange flame. From the sea, the curved pattern would warn an experienced captain that the ordinary signal had been reversed. A harbour bell began ringing below. A ship appeared through the storm. The Greyhaven. Her dark hull rose between the waves. The forward mast leaned at an unnatural angle, and figures crowded near the rail. "Passengers," Evelina said. Crane lifted the signal glass. "Families. At least 20. A horse appeared on the southern path. The rider wore a dark coat. 2 men followed him toward a narrow launch hidden beneath the cliffs. Tristan Bellam. He had come to recover whatever remained after the wreck. Tristan saw them. For one moment, he and Damian stared at each other across the rain. The man responsible for Edward's death stood less than half a mile away. If Damian followed now, he could catch him before the launch reached open water. Captain Crane shouted from the tower. "The Greyhaven has lost her steering." The ship turned broadside to the waves. A section of sail tore free. Damian remained fixed on Tristan. "He killed my brother." "Yes," Evelina said. "He left you to drown." "Yes." Another wave struck the Greyhaven. Passengers fell against the rail. Evelina stepped into Damian's path. "If you chase him now, you may finally possess your revenge." She pointed toward the ship. "But those people will pay for it." Damian looked toward Tristan. Then he turned his back on him. "Launch the lifeboat." Damian and Captain Crane took 6 men toward the Greyhaven. Evelina remained above the shore to control the signal lines and organize the rescue crew. The ship struck the outer reef. The sound reached the cliffs like thunder. Wood split. People screamed. "Fire the line," Evelina ordered. A small cannon launched a rope toward the ship. The first shot fell short. The second caught across the damaged deck. Sailors secured it. Children crossed first, in the rescue cradle. Then women. Then injured crewmen. Each time the rope tightened, the scars in Evelina's palms opened beneath her gloves. She did not release it. The lifeboat reached the Greyhaven's stern. Damian climbed onto the sinking ship. From the cliff, Evelina watched him disappear below deck. Minutes passed. The vessel settled lower. Captain Crane returned, carrying an unconscious sailor. Where was Damian? He went below for the captain. A section of the Greyhaven collapsed. The rescue rope jerked through Evelina's hands. "Hold!" she shouted. The crew leaned backward. Damian appeared at the broken rail. One arm supported the injured captain. The other held a small copper chest against his body. They entered the lifeboat as the Greyhaven rolled toward the reef. A wave struck them. Damian disappeared over the side. Evelina saw one hand break the surface. Then the darkness closed over him. She wrapped the main rope around her forearm. Pull! The rope cut through her gloves. The men pulled harder. Damian surfaced beside the lifeboat. Captain Crane caught his coat and dragged him aboard. They reached shore moments before the Greyhaven broke apart. Every passenger survived. Tristan's launch had vanished. Damian had lost his enemy, but he had chosen human lives instead. Inside the lighthouse, Crane forced open the copper chest. The original North Star inspection lay beneath layers of oilskin. Beside it were insurance accounts, stolen compensation records, and 2 orders bearing Tristan's signature. The first instructed the assistant keeper to reverse the signal on the night the North Star sank. The second ordered him to repeat the act when the Greyhaven approached. Evelina looked at Damian. Tristan had escaped the storm, but he had left behind the evidence that would finally destroy him. The hearing began 4 days after the Greyhaven disaster. The magistrate's chamber at Falmouth was too small for everyone who wished to enter. Shipowners stood beside fishermen. Sailors' widows filled the rear benches. Reporters waited near the doors with notebooks open across their knees. At the center of the room rested the copper chest, recovered from the Greyhaven. Tristan Bellamy stood beside his solicitor. His coat remained expensive, but the confidence he had worn at the Royal Maritime Exhibition had disappeared. His eyes moved repeatedly toward the doors, as though he still expected escape to arrive. Evelina sat beside Damian. His injured shoulder had been bound beneath his coat. A fresh cut crossed his temple. He had lost the opportunity to capture Tristan at Devil's Reef, but he had saved every passenger aboard the Greyhaven, and he had brought the truth back from the sea. Mr. Wren presented the original inspection report first. The surveyor had declared the North Star unfit to sail. Rot had spread beneath the waterline. The cargo exceeded the vessel's safe weight. The copy submitted to the insurers contained none of those warnings. Captain Mercer testified from a chair near the evidence table. Bruises still darkened one side of his face. "Lord Bellamy ordered the ship to depart," he said. "When I objected, he threatened to dismiss every sailor who refused. Tristan Solicitor rose. Captain Mercer disappeared for several days while under the protection of the Duke of Stormhaven. How can this court know his testimony was not purchased?" Mercer looked directly at Tristan. "Because his men beat me and placed me aboard a prison hulk under a false name. The false register was entered into evidence. Then came the insurance records. Cargo declared lost with the North Star had been sold months later through another port. Compensation intended for the dead sailors' families had been redirected into accounts connected to Tristan's partners. Finally, Mr. Wren opened the signed orders found inside the copper chest. The first instructed the assistant lighthouse keeper to reverse the signal on the night the North Star sank. The second ordered the same deception when the Greyhaven approached. The magistrate examined both pages. "Do you deny this signature, Lord Bellamy?" Tristan stood slowly. "These documents were supplied by the Duke of Stormhaven. A man who has spent 4 years attempting to ruin me. Damian rose. I did attempt to ruin him. A murmur spread through the chamber. Evelina looked at her husband. Damian's voice remained calm. I purchased his debts. I exposed companies trading under false names. I prevented investors from placing money into vessels I believed unsafe. Tristan turned toward the magistrate. You see? This is vengeance disguised as justice. Evelina stood. Vengeance may explain why a man searches for evidence. Every face turned toward her. It does not alter what the evidence contains. Mr. Wren placed the remaining documents before the magistrate. The payment made to the boatman at St. Orleans. The instruction to remove the final launch before the tide entered the chapel. The forged French letters, claiming Evelina, had fled with a lover. The demand for £30,000 and control of Merrow's northern quay. Captain Crane testified that Tristan's private launch had left the island while Evelina remained behind. Tristan's composure finally broke. She agreed to marry me, he said. She understood it was a financial arrangement. Evelina looked at the man who had once decided her life was worth less than a harbor. I agreed to a marriage. Her voice carried through the silent chamber. I did not agree to drown so that you could inherit sympathy instead of debt. Tristan stepped toward her. A constable blocked his path. You would have lost everything without me, he snapped. I nearly lost everything because of you. The magistrate ordered Tristan committed to custody pending trial for fraud, forgery, extortion, theft of compensation funds, unlawful imprisonment, and deliberately endangering 2 vessels. His remaining warehouses, ships, and accounts would be placed under legal control until ownership of the stolen funds could be determined. Tristan struggled when the constables took his arms. He looked toward Damian. You think you have won? Damian regarded him without satisfaction. No. Then he looked at Evelina. I think you have finally lost the power to decide what happens to anyone else. Tristan was taken from the chamber. Outside, the news spread across the harbor faster than any newspaper could carry it. Evelina remained beside the evidence table. For 4 years, Damian had built his life around the destruction of Tristan Bellamy. Now that the moment had arrived, he did not look victorious. He looked empty. They walked outside together. Rainwater still shone across the harbor stones, but sunlight had begun breaking through the clouds. Damian handed Evelina a folded document. What is this? An amendment to our marriage settlement. She opened it. The document gave her the right to leave the marriage with Merrow Harbor, her separate property, and the Coastal Relief Fund untouched. There was no accusation of abandonment, no financial punishment, no attempt to reclaim anything Damian had already placed under her control. You are offering me freedom, Evelina said. I should have offered it before the war ended. His voice lowered. I married you partly because your survival could destroy him. Whatever our marriage became afterward does not erase how it began. And what do you want now? For the first time since she had known him, the Duke of Stormhaven looked uncertain. I want you to remain. He stepped closer, but did not touch her. But I will not make wanting you another form of captivity. Evelina looked down at the unsigned amendment. And if I choose to stay, then stay, because this is where you wish to build your life. The harbor bells began ringing behind them, not as a storm warning. This time, they welcomed the surviving crew of the Greyhaven home. 6 months later, the road to St. Orleans Island opened beneath a clear spring tide. The chapel no longer stood abandoned. Its broken doors had been replaced. The roof had been repaired, and the stone floor raised above the highest recorded tide. Shelves inside held blankets, medicine, lantern oil, and sealed containers of food. A warning bell hung above the entrance. Beside the chapel stood a new rescue station. Its brass plaque carried no ducal crest. The Stormhaven Coastal Relief Trust. Evelina had refused to place Damian's name above the door. The coast does not belong to one family, she had told him. Damian had looked at the finished plaque. No, but apparently it now answers to my wife. Money recovered from Tristan's seized warehouses funded the first lifeboat. The stolen compensation from the North Star was returned to the sailors' families. Every ship entering Merrow or Stormhaven Harbor now faced an independent inspection before receiving permission to sail. Tristan Bellamy had been convicted of fraud, forgery, extortion, and deliberately endangering both the North Star and the Greyhaven. The court sentenced him to a long term of penal servitude. For the first time in his life, no title, borrowed fortune, or respectable acquaintance had opened a door for him. Evelina did not attend the sentencing. Tristan had already taken enough of her time. She controlled the Coastal Trust herself. She reviewed its accounts, selected its trustees, and trained women from the fishing villages to manage emergency stores whenever storms isolated the coast. Damian offered ships, warehouses, and money. He did not offer commands. Her father's estate remained protected beneath independent management. The Earl no longer possessed the authority to mortgage Merrow Harbor without approval. Lydia's trust was secure. For the first time in either sister's life, marriage was no longer necessary for survival. Evelina stood outside the restored chapel as the final workmen departed. The sea was calm. Sunlight moved across the water, where dark waves had once pulled her beneath the surface. Damian approached, carrying a folded document. "You have brought another amendment," Evelina said. "The same one." It was the agreement granting her the right to leave their marriage with her property, Merrow Harbor, and the relief fund untouched. She had kept it unsigned for 6 months. Damian held it out. "You should decide before people begin arriving for the opening." "I have decided." His expression revealed nothing, but she saw the tension in his shoulders. Evelina took the document. Then she tore it in half. Damian stared at the pieces. "That was legally binding." "I know. You could simply have refused to sign. That would have been less satisfying." A faint smile touched his mouth, but uncertainty remained in his eyes. "You are staying." "I am." "Because Merrow is secure?" "No." "Because of the trust?" "No." Damian looked toward the sea. "Then why?" Evelina stepped closer. "Because when you offered me protection, you also gave me the right to refuse it." She placed one hand against his chest. "Because you listened when I told you that revenge was not justice." Her voice softened. "And because, when you finally had to choose between catching Tristan and saving innocent lives, you turned away from the man you hated." Damian covered her hand with his. "I chose you once because I believed your survival could punish my enemy." "I know. I choose you now because you taught me that a life built around hatred is only another kind of wreck." Evelina looked up at him. "I chose you once because your name could protect my family. And now? Now I choose you because you allowed me to discover that I could protect myself." Damian bent toward her, then stopped. "May I?" Evelina smiled. "You are still asking. I promised to improve." She lifted her face. "Yes." He kissed her beneath the bell that would warn future travelers of the tide. There was no ballroom watching, no enemy to humiliate, no agreement waiting for signatures, only the sound of the sea, and 2 people who had finally chosen each other without fear. That evening, clouds gathered beyond the horizon. The warning bell rang once. The rescue crew moved toward the boats, while the new lighthouse beam swept across the darkening water. Evelina stood beside Damian at the top of the tower. "Are you afraid of storms?" he asked. She watched the light cross the sea. "Only when no one is prepared to answer them." Damian took her hand. "Then we will answer." Once, the sea had taken Evelina's veil, her future, and the life others had chosen for her. Now the same water carried ships safely home beneath a light she had helped build. She had not survived the storm merely to become a duchess. She had survived it to become the shore.